mulifanya ukora pale, Moi akawaweka kwa ile ilikuwa inaitwa sijui ilikuwa inaitwa cooperation. Mkalete fujo hapo na maandamano kidogo, mkapata mkate kwa Mheshimiwa Kibaki. Mkakuja mkalete ukora hapa na maandamano kidogo, mkaweka vitisho kwa Uhuru Kenyatta, akapanga handshake. Sasa mnafikiri mnaweza kunipangia mimi ati maandamano? Ati mpate chochote kutoka kwangu? You are dreaming.
It is a very busy morning with traffic this morning, and we're looking at quite some of that coming off of the Thika Superhighway. That's been there for at least an hour or so, and it's starting to build up even more. Also coming off of the Eastern Bypass from from Utawala out towards North Airport Road, with traffic coming off of Outer Ring. That whole area very busy. Some of that traffic comes off of Manyanja Road, crosses over Outer Ring, going then towards Jogo Road. And there is quite some traffic on Mombasa Road this morning, and that's heading in from just past the interchange going towards the Likoni interchange essentially, and there's heavy traffic then as you touch on the Nyaya Stadium roundabout. So that's still doing the thing there. Langata Road very, very busy, and traffic coming out of the whole Westlands area busy as well. So we are in traffic hour, and it is proper this morning. So we're going to keep an eye on all of this and see how it opens up, and we all do this in an attempt to keep things moving. Let's talk to each other and keep it just that. Spice FM KE on X, hashtag the Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
6 minutes after 8 o'clock into the third hour of Kenya's biggest conversation this Monday. It's a wet and rainy one, but getting into new seasons. It seems that new things happen, and then there's an opportunity at new life. But some things, no matter how much, just don't change, and they remain the same. It's around some of those conversations that we are having this morning. It's Ndu CT and Dennis with you today. And as we look at some of those matters, joining us shortly will be the Secretary General of the Jubilee Party, Jeremiah Kioni. He'll join us in a short while as he makes his way here. He says he's been in some traffic, but we'll wait and see how that opens up. So there are very many conversations, and the issue around solutions. And before we even get to have that conversation with Jeremiah, the solution question is one that rings this morning. It's rung for a while. And are the people, because they are the ones in the majority when we're talking about nations, the people who make the law, the people who interpret the law, the people who execute the law are in the minority. When that comes to leadership, they are in the minority, a stark minority. And usually when things go right, you usually don't have a problem. People are at a lull, right? When things go wrong, and as they would do every now and then, and they just keep compounding, and the snowball gets larger and larger as it goes down the hill, folks say, don't complain so much. Don't be so negative. Don't be so pessimistic, but that you should have hope, and that you should not just complain, but that you should look towards the solutions and what those are. Are people helpless when it comes to solutions, things that you can actually do? Are the people to blame when it seems as though you are helpless and that there's nothing that you can do? And so I heard somebody say on Saturday, so what was I supposed to do? Was I supposed to show up at KICC and tell these guys, absolutely not, you guys are joking? Would that have been a solution? So when we talk about look for the solution, say what the solutions are, what are some of those things that we say you must then do?
How do you tell the difference between someone being helpless and them being reluctant to take action? How?
What does reluctance look like?
Something that admittedly you could do if you wanted to, but you don't. Now, you could give helplessness as a reason and say, I don't think there'll be any change. I had a conversation with my Uber driver, as I do every morning.
Yeah.
And I asked him what his take was. And he told me people are angry. I said, actually, let me repeat my question again. Are you angry? He said, yes. I said, why are you angry? And he said, I'm angry because I have a child who completed university, and I was looking at the money I paid. It was less than 200,000 for the 4 years the child was in university. And I have another child in university, and it appears like within 18 months, I'm going to spend the same amount of money. And the business that I'm in, I'm looking at it and I'm looking at what it is that we're doing. I am unable, so I'm angry. I said, okay. And so now that you're angry, what are you going to do with your anger? I said, what? I don't understand. I said, you're angry, okay. Do you feel good that you're angry? Do you feel good that you're upset? He said, no. I said, don't you think it would be perhaps worth your while to consider what it is you ought to do, even with that anger, where you ought to direct it? Yes. Some that will be productive and some that will be useful. He told me, I don't expect anything to change. I said, so then why are you angry? Because if you got into a point where you don't expect anything to change, then what are you angry about?
There's nothing left, essentially.
Yes, so what are you angry about? Anyway, this conversation we said we will continue, okay? But I'm asking the same question. People lament and complain and pitch a fit because they feel that is their contribution to trying to solve the problem or to having their views known about the problem, okay? And having done that, they've done their bit.
I think so. I
That's
really
it.
do think that there is a place for this lamentation.
Yes.
I think that there is a place for this vexed spirit to come out. And whether it seems like it's forever pessimistic, or whether it's contrived negativity, whatever the case may be, I think that there is a place for somebody to open their mouth and say, you know what, I'm actually not happy with this thing. I mean, I keep likening it to a baby, and it could be rudimentary in terms of its explanation. But if a child is upset over something, that child will cry and cry and cry until what? Until you either feed it, change it, carry it, something.
You pay attention,
You do something.
and figure out what that, yes.
Exactly. At that point, how else will that child... and they're not helpless. That is the mechanism that they have. That is the thing that they have that is going to grab your attention. They will complain. If you don't do anything about it, they will up the decibels a notch. They will cry. And then in some cases, they will even get sick. They will get to fever pitch until you do something about it. But they're not going to give you any rest. They might lull for a minute because they get exhausted from crying. But guess what? If that issue still persists, they will still wake up and cry till you do something about it.
Yeah, so there is my Buddha guy called Steve Okanda. We were having a discussion yesterday. And I asked Steve, whatever happened on Friday, what's your take? Do you think that Raila Odinga has let you down? And he was like, no, Raila has not let me down. What is done is what we expected. The only thing that remains right now is how do we make sure that the things they've agreed upon with William Ruto will come to pass. For him, he says, it is not about complaining right now because whether we like it or not, it has happened. How to move forward after that agreement is what is important.
You see, sometimes you get stuck in your complaining. And in getting stuck, you look for more things to complain about.
Yeah.
And as I said, there's some joy, no matter how bizarre, that one derives from complaining.
There's a feel-good factor in it.
Yes, there is.
Yes, yeah.
There is, and especially if you're the group of people and you're all lamenting about the same thing. So this one
Misery
laments,
loves company.
then hands it over to the next person. They lament. You do that for half an hour. You leave there feeling you've actually done something. But the thing that I find good about it and why I agree with you, when we are able to actually vocalize what it is we think is the problem, we have taken a massive step.
Absolutely.
You can even itemize it and say it is this and this and this and this and this. You're actually freeing your mind to understanding the problem you have. Once you understand it, then it's not difficult to figure out how it is you ended up there and who it is who is causing this pain point. The next step would be, now what do we do about it so that this pain stops paining?
Yes.
See? It is progress. It is progression. There are countries where you cannot lament like this. You lament at your own risk, literally.
Well, if you live to lament again.
I like how you point it like this.
Yeah. If you live to lament again.
Where?
Yeah. You can be disappeared. That's the truth.
Where?
Yeah.
In some countries, you won't disappear. But my friend, you and the snake will be comparing it in notes on how you got beaten. The simple thing is this.
Yes.
Dissent, as we call it, is often not tolerated. On this continent, probably more, the Asian continent compete with us, some parts of it. But political leadership in this continent are very, 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 very loath to be told something that is contrary to what they would like to hear. And part of the reason is because in their hearts, they know they're doing wrong.
Yes. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it.
And they know they shouldn't do it, but they're doing it anyway. And that's why there's a need to constantly hear people saying that you're doing the right thing. And anyone who says this is not the right thing, that person is immediately an insult.
I actually look forward to a day when Kenyans will be saying that we gave you the mandate and we see you deliver to us and we clap for you and tell you that you have delivered to us. Because for a very long time, it's sad to say that Kenyans have complained about them not getting their end of the bargain. And as much as dissent is being looked as though you're not speaking the language that should be heard, it is important and it has its place even in our constitution. All that matters is, like Siti has said, it is not about just lamenting and leaving it there. It's how do we progress these lamentations so that we get the results that we need. I think for me is how do we progress the complaints to get the results that we need? Because whether like it or not, the two individuals will get it. They will get it proper.
You know, I would take a leaf from that particular book of yours and say, let's start with that, the more difficult thing.
Yes.
Lamenting is easy, and pointing fingers at political leaders even easier, because people talk about leaving breadcrumbs. These guys leave loaves of bread. Even if you wanted to miss it, you can't miss. The misdeeds are in your face.
Sadly, but it's right there. You don't have to go for it.
What we can control, though, is our participation in all these things that we don't like. First of all, by admitting that actually we do participate, because we pretend as though we don't, and yet we do. If you limit your participation, you know what you've done? You have eliminated the power that these individuals will have over you. If, for instance, I refuse to be bribed, then you can't influence me the way you want.
Yes.
I've taken back the power. And I can tell you, look, this is what we'd like you to do. When you take that bribe, you have now sold over your power, and the strength you had to even bring about change is diminished, because that person can talk back at you and say, did I not give you money? What do you think the money was for? So, everyone has a part they can play, and it's usually at the very, very basic level. I used to ask some young men I knew when I worked in Luo Nyanza, this 50 bob that you're given, what can you do with it exactly? I said, what? This 50 bob.
Yeah, I've asked you.
What do you do with the 50 bob? They talked around it. I said, so is it worth your while? Because you take the 50 bob, look at what it is you do for the 50 bob. Is it worth 50 bob?
Or if you were to look at the converse, to say that you actually did an interrogation of the individual who did or didn't give you the 50 shillings and what they would or would not do if you put them in a position of leadership, that there's some things that then you wouldn't have to look for that 50 shillings, that there would be, programs put in place to ensure that your livelihoods are protected, that you would then have a conducive environment through which you're able to do business, that you could go to school and not have to pay an arm and a leg literally to do it, that you're sick would be able to be taken care of in hospital. You see, unfortunately, that's what civic education does, that a lot of people are trying to throttle. That an uneducated, informed citizenry is actually a threat to mediocre power,
Preach.
It is a threat because people understand that, you know what, if these people know the likelihood of them allowing me to get away with murder then decreases significantly. That people know that if you are educated, if you are informed, if you know what is supposed to be the case, half of these people that you put into positions of power, you wouldn't. So here you are saying, this 50 shillings that you're giving me, if you interrogated it and say, actually, hang on a minute, 50 shillings could get me a meal, and by the end of the day, the thing is done. Even the energy that I would expend from it, I'm done. All right? Today, maybe it wouldn't get you so much. But if you look at 50 shillings and you compare it to what could actually come about if you had proper, sound leadership in place, It's incomparable. And I would dare say that those who give the 50 shillings thrive on the knowledge that the recipient of the 50 shillings is none the wiser.
And again, right now, the heat that our leaders are facing right now is due to the fact that the population that there is are people who can they can Google that constitution and read it and tell you, I think you're lying to us. And the threat that our leadership face right now is they do not know how to deal with a population that can read, that understand you're lying, and that they can tell it to your face. That is why dissent is considered to be oppositional power. Reason why security forces will be deployed to deal with you accordingly. Because even yesterday, what the Gen Zs or the young people were doing outside that church, they were just communicating, telling them, you have let us down.
Were they damaging property?
They were not damaging property. They were actually outside on the roads just chanting.
Were they obstructing traffic?
At some point, yes. And that's when the police got in and lobbed tear gas. But that notwithstanding, they are communicating, saying, you have agreed to be bribed, something that we are fighting against. And this is a place or a room that politicians find themselves in that they do not know how to deal with it, because the population is learned. They know what is good or bad. The only sad thing, though, is that the population, when they go to vote, still take the 50 bob and make the wrong choices. Or,
you know, the thing that I find deplorable is not the 50 bob, the taking or the giving of it, but the depths to which one sinks to the point where you are willing to sell for that paltry sum the one right that you are given by our constitution to actually make the change that brings about benefit to you.
the change you're fighting for.
The thing that will bring about what Du has so elaborately stated. You decide that it is worth 50 bob. I'm told it's going to 200 bob. Even if it's 500 bob.
Even if it's
1,000.
Yes. Okay. So it means that there's a gap. And at some level, why I'm saying this is, I get the impression that the ordinary citizen has at some point given up. It's like, whatever will happen, will happen. And yet, there is a population of young people in this country who have clearly not given up.
Yes.
If anything, they're just beginning. Because when people protest, you will know that next time somebody receives money, you can expect that the protest will be loud. And you will be called out. Now, the thing that we haven't brokered or arrived at a clear understanding about is, how does this reflect in our lives? When we're a group of people, it works because there's a commonality of understanding that we are now progressing. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because come election time, our habits of bribery, the same habits will not have gone away until the purported or the leadership that intends to present themselves understand it won't work. If there's nothing that indicates that it won't work, they will do exactly the same things that they have done.
See, elections in this country is really, really expensive. And it's pretty much expensive because politicians know they will have to bribe for them to get there. You know, if you look at other jurisdictions, politicians fundraise for them to go campaign and whatnot. Here, you don't know the source of that money that you're being given. But when these people get there, that's when you see helicopters being bought and 19 helicopters in a football game on a day and the participants being given 15,000 shillings.
Which comes first? And I'll ask it this way. Which comes first? The desire that a politician feels that not worth their mettle, and so they need to give a little bit of something to egg folks on to give them their vote, or that people are the ones who say to politicians, well, if you want our vote, you're going to have to give me something. Which do you think came first?
I know what came first.
Please.
Because I witnessed it. In the time of the late President Moi's government, is when we had Harambes take on a completely new meaning.
Yes.
In the Kenyatta era, there were Harambes, but Harambes were, like village gatherings. They were a cottage industry. In the Moi era, they became bigger. And the result of these Harambes was seen. Schools got built, churches got built. We saw it. But we also saw huge amounts of money that had hitherto not been heard of being given for these Harambes. That was Harambe, and you actually saw what was being done with the money. You actually saw it. But then came the normal and ordinary process of electioneering, giving your campaigners some money so that they can move around with. And then came in multi-partyism. Okay? Two things happened. One, prior to that, what would happen is we didn't have laws that prohibited you as to what amount you could give.
Right.
No. So a lot of the money was supposed to be for the campaigns, but it was also to influence people who, what we now call influencers, who had people who could support them. It was at that level.
Yeah.
Where one saw a huge leap of it was when multi-partyism came in, and we saw the likes of Kenneth Matiba coming in to the campaign. That's when one saw the sort of monies being spent, money that had never been witnessed in any electioneering. But with multi-partyism came something interesting. And this I saw in Luo Nyanza.
Yeah.
People who belonged to parties that the government did not like were prohibited from having, see the sort of meetings that people have in the parks and what have you.
Yes.
They were banned. So you couldn't meet. So people would go to funerals.
And meet there.
Well, a funeral is a public place.
And
they
there's
would
people
send a
there.
message.
Yeah.
Now, money that had been given up to that point was voluntary. Somebody would give money for the purpose I explained. Then the opposition decided to explain and told the people, there's something you need to understand. This money that people give you, it is your money. And they gave it a term, they call it taxpayer. Payer, I'm using the term they used. And they are Kanu people. When they come to give you money, it's the taxes that you've paid that they've taken and they're giving it back to you. So take the money.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's where I saw people anticipating and expecting that it is okay. Before the purposes were clear, bribery wasn't out in the open and running around. It then got to a point where people would accept the money. Before, they would reject the money. The message of accepting the money would not have borne any fruit if that was already happening. It was something new. Accept the money that you're being given. Essentially, money being given for electioneering purposes were akin to being a Kanu supporter.
Yeah.
And that was the party that the people in that region I spoke of were working against. So all it did was, with the time, it gathered its own momentum. And then it became the norm.
Metamorphosized. Yeah.
Yes, and then just grew. And with every election, people spent more and more money. And then something else happened. MPs started being paid more money. Before, the MPs didn't have money.
So there was more cash to dole out.
Yeah.
No, they started being paid more money.
Yeah.
Before, nobody really bothered with them because they also knew these guys don't have money.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, what we see now, that has morphed into money for MCAs, money, the equivalent of CDF, of course, money for senators, money is for women rep. It is the metamorphization of the process until we've gotten there. Now, all these monies, CDF has brought about many changes that we have seen. But then the argument is, so long as you have the political leaders in charge of it, it amounts to being a slush fund. So what have you done? You've legalized a process of ensuring that any elected leader will have more money than their salary to dole out as they see fit. Because if you're influencing development, it means you have the means to enforce certain things and you have the means to change certain things because of the might you now wield through the purse. Yes.
And those are some of the things that we look at. Sioni Kioni is what somebody is saying this morning because he was supposed to be here at 8 o'clock, and that one we're going to have to talk about because, you know, it's happened a number of times. Jubilee Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni is supposed to be here at 8 o'clock. It would appear that he's still on his way. So we're going to continue that conversation. Hopefully when we come back from the break, he would have joined us to look at now what, opposition politics are saying, of course, in line with what has happened over the last couple of days. But we've been looking at that solution-oriented conversation where folks are saying, okay, so then what do you do? When at the top of it, it doesn't look as though you as the people have a choice. Well, one thing that we can say off the kicker, be informed, stay informed, and open your mouth when it comes to certain things that you see happening which are off color. So it's just 1, 2, 3, and that's where it starts. Kenya's biggest conversation takes a break to look at weather and traffic. We'll be back after this. It's 8:29.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start.
Dial star 811 star 916 hash to get Niwe by Mr. Dawa.
How did your wife push you out? Because probably I know most of the wives, quote unquote, they always want that aspect of safety. How did your wife ended up pushing you out of
She
employment?
told me you have to do business. You're good at it.
Yeah. How are you surviving?
She was really helpful. Whatever she'll get, she'll give me the bus fare and I go. Because the best empires, I've read it, they start from nothing.
It was actually nothing. From the conversation you had with Chandari's granddaughter, it was like we started from nothing.
What are you hiding from me? You're putting on an act to hide the truth from me. Tell me, Akash. Why are you all lying? Where's Arjun? He isn't here. I know that Arjun hasn't been here at the house.
Mom, you were right. I found out why Akash refused to get married to me. It is all because he was never really serious about me in the first place.
What?
I found out that there is another girl in Akash's life, other than me.
I am sorry, Gia. I have to pretend to be Arjun or else... I'm really sorry.
Just answer my question, Krishna. Why did you say that you would take the blame instead?
Spice FM, Nairobi.
It is 27 minutes to the top of the hour, and indeed, Atasisi Atuoni Kioni, and it continues like that. And it was an opportunity to have a conversation with him about what the opposition looks like. And so I guess traffic is doing a doozy this morning, but let's wait and see what happens. In the meantime, still important for us to have some of the conversations that we are having around. So now, what does this mean? When we look at situations whereby, if we're going to look at this 10-point agenda, just as an example, and where folks are looking at, what can we actually do? When we see things like corruption, which is one thing that's being called out on, when we see things like, people being disappeared and abductions happening, when we see things like corruption at the taking place at the county level, is it the purview of just those who are in a position of leadership to stop it? Because people are actually, and this is a practical question that we're asking this morning. So what am I supposed to do? I see this happening. What am I supposed to do? Frog march somebody or walk into the governor's office? Am I supposed to write a letter? Do I send an email? Do I send something by pigeon post? What am I supposed to do? When I see something like that going wrong, do I sit here and say, well, okay, guys, I was in a particular office and this is what I saw? Do I make it known? How do we participate in this thing that we often reserve the right to complain about because we're not in positions of power? How do you actually contribute to it to make a difference? What do you do? What do you really do?
In a queue, and somebody walks out of nowhere and just goes to the front of the queue.
Yeah, the daughter of Engineer Oko will not agree. Me, Ndu, will not agree. I will ask you if you did not see the rest of us.
Yes.
Who are
I remember
standing there.
when we were getting the vaccination for COVID.
Yeah. We were together, I believe.
Yes, we were.
We were at the Bagathi place.
Yes, and there were individuals. I remember 2 individuals who decided to sort of like jump ahead of the queue. And I was hoping that the medical practitioner who was doing the needful
do something about it. Yeah.
No, but there was a lady who was in front of me. Occasionally, lady asked, the rest of us are queuing, why do you feel that you're the one who must go ahead of everybody? And the person stopped. You know what occurred to me? It's like they hadn't thought through what they were doing because they stopped and looked surprised. Looked very surprised. Nobody else in the queue said a thing. When we left that was the registration. We went now to get the vaccination. He did the same thing again. This time I'm the one who asked him. I asked him, why do you think that your issue is of greater importance than the rest of us and everybody else is waiting their turn? He said, no, I came with my father. He's an elderly gentleman. I said, can we see your father? It was an elderly gentleman. That guy was older than me, which makes him really old. Okay? I said, had you said so, we would easily have let the gentleman get his vaccination.
Yes.
Yeah, but what about me? I said, no, you, not you. Him, yes.
Him, yes. You queue.
You queue like everybody else.
Yes. And you actually took me back to something that happened when I was going to Brussels. So we are queuing immigration, Brussels airport. And there's this gentleman who equally just decides to walk straight all the way. And people complained. You know what happened by the time we got to immigration? He was stopped. He was taken to a room. He was deported back. Yes.
For jumping the queue?
For jumping the queue.
Surely there must have been something else. Can you imagine that now?
Me jumping the queue is good enough for me.
Come on. No, this is the thing. Imagine my response to that. I was like, come on, how can you deport somebody for jumping the queue? But look at how seriously folks take things that we have gotten to the point whereby it has glossed over. It's like it's like no big deal. Please.
But it is jumping the queue that led to him being...
He was noticed.
You know? He was noticed.
And what does the guy think? I was in Kitale a while back last year, and I went to a bank. There's this premier section. We're supposed to get preferential treatment. So I was sitting waiting my turn. Somebody came, a young lady came well after me. When the person was the teller left, she just walked up. The teller told her, please go back. Yes. I was watching. Just go back. That gentleman has been sitting there waiting. Please go back. Again, I saw the surprise. What I'm trying to say is, we've internalized doing things that make us happy without thinking of other people or the consequences.
Absolutely.
You know?
It's not as though these people mean to be offensive. They just figure, why don't I just walk ahead? And there's a mindset that we have acquired over time that prevents us from doing things that we ought to do.
Yes. You can imagine a situation where the president went to that church, gave 20 million shillings, and that pastor said, Mr. President, thank you for this donation, but please tell us the source. Until you can come with clean papers, we don't need your money.
You're right. And just even as you say that, so yesterday, just watching the news yesterday, and I saw this other church where a number of politicians were yesterday, and then, immediate former deputy president Rigathi Gachagua was there as well. And this was a church service. Yes. It was not a ceremony for something else at 12 in the It was in the morning. There was a service taking place. And I thought to myself, surely these pastors and deacons had planned for this service. If it was a morning service, 8 o'clock to 10, and then, you have the other one from 10 to 12, whatever. you planned for a service, you have your thing, what you're supposed to be doing normally. Do you plan for this 1 hour that politicians have come here to talk about, I don't know what is going on here? Do you plan for that as well? And I looked, and then I now ignored the politicians on the microphone, and I looked at the row of pastors behind them. And they sat there, most of them in this stance, with their hands on their chins, just, waiting. And I said, what could have possibly happened? What could have been done? What was the agreement for them to sit back and allow something like that to happen, where people have come to feed off of something for the week, whatever? But then what could have happened whereby you sit and allow that kind of thing to go on? Because whatever those politicians were talking about had nothing to do with the sermon of the day, with nothing to do with the reading. So I said, what must have happened for that to take place? Did money change hands? But then we're just keeping quiet because, okay, so long as we don't say it doesn't mean it's happening. Have we gotten to the point where we accommodate anything and have made it so normal? Just when you talked about this incident in the airport, and I think to myself, I was like, oh my God, even I have said that these things have become so normalized that when you see something that would be a drastic action, you're thinking, hold on a minute. Why so drastic? Why deport a man because he jumped the queue? Now, can you imagine what it would look like if things worked in the way in which they ought to? And that we are serious about calling people and ourselves out. That we've become so comfortable with the status quo that when somebody were to reprimand somebody else for doing something, you are almost asking, why so harsh?
No, not why, but we do that.
How dare you even call
that? But we do that. We do that. We read the papers. Somebody has been jailed for 10 years because he stole $1 million. You're saying, but surely he only stole $1 million. And you think, what do you mean he only stole
After all, the
$1 million?
people who stole more.
Yes.
Yeah.
That conversation lends itself to the very thing we're saying. You have over time eroded your own moral position to the point where you are actually wishy-washy. Anything goes.
Yeah.
And our moral has just gotten so bad because I have many examples. The other day I'm at GPO. There's this footpath that is opposite to that toilet that is there. So I'm standing there, I'm waiting for taxi. Then a police officer manning the building walks there and tells me to walk. Toka paenda. And I'm like, why should I? This is a public space. This is a public building. You want me to go and go where? The police got shocked. Why am I talking back? Why am I responding? Then he asks, so this place is only public to you and not everyone else? And I told him, I have every right to be here.
To stand here.
This is a public space. I am not doing anything that is threatening your work. Kindly focus on what you're doing. The police walked away, came back with his boss. And I told the boss, I am here legally. I'm not breaking any law. This is a public space.
There's nothing that prohibits you from standing where you're standing.
What you're doing is actually breaking the law. Take me to court and I'll argue it in court. The police walked away. If we keep on standing our ground and doing the right thing, everybody else will get into this space, be it the president, the police. They will get into this space of doing the right thing. But if we keep on accepting the wrong things being done, we're not moving.
You know what is the problem is? You find a subversion of duties. His job is actually to protect the public.
Yes.
But he seems to feel that he's only doing his job if he's harassing the public. How did that twist come in? Somebody is protesting and using legal means to protest. It's called picketing. And you decide this picketing is against the law. You first of all lobby tear gas, and then anybody runs in your direction, you thump the living daylights out of them. You're supposed to be there to protect them. But here you are, it's like you're looking for the moment when you can beat someone. Okay. This anger management thing, what is it that is making you so angry against these people?
Perhaps because you know very well you're breaking the law, but you've been given an order. So
there's a frustration that I think our security people, especially the civilian security, the policemen, have, that it's like they look for an outlet, and if you happen to be in that crowd of people protesting, you will provide ample. But when you know you can get away with something that is clearly wrong and unlawful, you encourage other people to do the same. You know, I'm going back to what we started off by looking at, the personal responsibility that we bear.
Yes.
I was reading here and someone says that I'm a bit archaic. This is me translating. No. This is the freedom. If I have a view that he doesn't consider to be up to scale, I am archaic, and they're not wrong. When you ask for leadership that will meet your needs, you should not start with an individual in mind. You should start with the qualities you expect that individual to have and actually write them down. These are the things we want. Right.
They should fit into that.
Yes. Not they happen to sound good or compared to the others. What do you know about that person?
Yeah.
Write it down. Then ask yourself the second question. Okay, when these guys were in positions of authority, what was it? And how did they carry out that mandate?
Yes.
What did the people who worked with them say about this person? Because they're the ones who interact with them, not you. Now, when you've done that, just as a basic, you then begin the journey of deciding whether this is a person you can actually elect or not. But like now, again, the question we asked earlier on, this entire array of individuals who feel that they want to be leaders. This quality that they have that would make them better than the people we have, what exactly is it? Because now the claim by everybody that they'll be better. How? What is it that guarantees us that they'll be better?
There is no guarantee.
Precisely.
Don't you play, you mean it's a role of chance.
There is no guarantee in the individual, but where the guarantee comes from is in us being able to hold them to account. When you hold people to account, the options that they have, that wiggle room is limited significantly.
I think there's also a significant role that the knowledge of that individual, of what the people will or will not do, plays here. That they know or not that the people are at this level whereby into these waters you will not go and joke, because somebody is bound to keep you righteous. Somebody is bound to keep you accountable. The opposite is also true. They also know how they can or cannot behave, because they know these guys are not going to come and shout. They're not going to make noise. They're not going to keep anybody accountable. There'll be a little bit of noise for some time, and then they'll let it go.
Yes.
That's the thing. They know. They know whether you'll keep them accountable. They also know whether you will keep quiet.
Yes.
And that, the only way, in my opinion, to be able to sort something like that is to be on toes all the time.
Yes.
For yourself as an individual, forming the basic units of society, from family to community to governments, etc., etc. It starts with you. It really, really does.
It does.
And if we can't get to the point whereby nonsense will not be accepted, that's why I shouldn't be met with chagrin when you tell me a man was deported because he caused a ruckus in an airport. No, because that's the way it should be. That certain things will not be accepted. You will not be able to steal the chicken on the side of the road. Neither will you be able to steal county funds that are meant to educate children at the ECD level. Neither will you divert capitation. Neither will you say that a health system belongs to just a few people. Neither will you then say that you can misappropriate funds that were supposed to be used for something else. Neither will you say that you knew the floods were coming and that you would not sort something out. You will not do any of those things, and you will not steal an election.
And neither will you be a president of doublespeak, if you know what I mean. Because let's when you keep talking about the issues that bedevil us as a country, at times it's good to go back. That's why City gives us any dictionary and knowledge, because if you know City in terms of experience and being there. So if we just look back at Kenyans are complaining about how much is being donated and whatnot. Let's go back to when we needed to have streamline or some form of policy on how much these leaders get to spend during campaigns. And according to reports here, IEBC in 2021 had placed the cap at 4.4 billion shillings for presidential campaigns.
4.4 what?
Billion shillings. But, yes, cap.
Hey!
However, these proposed regulations faced significant opposition in Parliament and were ultimately rejected due to technicalities and timing issues. That meant anyone who was campaigning that time would spend up to $1 trillion shillings if they wanted,
It wouldn't matter.
in order for them to get to that office. Which begs the question, once they get there and they spent that much, how do they recoup it back? Ni swali tu. Ni swali tu. So are you surprised that you're now giving out 20 million shillings? No. Silence.
I mean, there has to be for a minute.
But
There has to be for a minute because
What
I'm
you've just said
asking
requires
myself more.
silence.
It does. It does.
so that you can just do the maths, take a deep breath, and ask. Someone doesn't do that if they don't think it has an effect.
Yes.
Someone does it because they know it has worked before.
And there's a reason why it was objected in the National Assembly to start with. Because then we know, City, you're worth how much? How much did you spend? We can trace the dots to where we are today.
You know what? I think about, the conversations that we had over the last couple of days and the things that happened come Friday. I mean, since Friday with this new pact. And I think about the last, give or take, 10 years and how people have said, that they live in spite of the government. That, anything can be happening, but they're just going to live anyway. They're going to find a way to send their children to school. They're going to find a way to put food on the table, find a way to care for the sick and bury the dead kind of thing. You'll find a way. But then I've also come to the realization that there are many folks in positions of leadership that live in spite of the people.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter how high you raise your hands in protest, that they're going to do what they're going to do, regardless of how much noise you're making. Because the noise is not sustained, the action then is by just a few. And until and unless you have a constant and consistent level of accountability in the same measure in terms of volume, that you're not going to see any change. Can you imagine if on Friday the pact or the union or whatever it is that was being done and people realized and they said, you know what, guys, maybe this is not what Kenyans want, and to have been so vigilant about the position of Kenyans to say, you know what, guys, we're making a mistake here, and what is it really going to take to turn things around? Is this it? No, it's just not on.
Yeah.
Because who in their minds is convinced unequivocally that the decisions that they took on Friday are actually going to turn the country around? Convinced truthfully and openly and honestly. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who's really convicted that this move is actually going to make a difference. You'll be hard-pressed to find one person speaking in truth and honesty. People know what they're supposed to do. And that's what makes it worse for me.
Is hope logical?
I think it is. That you can hope that things can get better. I mean, look, it doesn't matter what religion you subscribe to.
Yeah.
But I think every one of them has that thing vested in hope. I mean, when we talk about the one that we know, these things remain: faith, hope, and love. They still tell us that the greatest of these is love. But hope was mentioned in one of the in that thing.
Mm-hmm.
That what is that? It is the feeling that the next minute, the next hour, the next evening, the next morning, things can actually get better. Or that something will come. I will get somewhere. It's something that it's inexplicable, but you have that can actually be. Can you put hope in the wrong people? Absolutely. But does it diminish hope? It doesn't.
It doesn't. You see, when you talk about the 9-point report, and I'll just go and just tick them as we go. Implementation of National NADCO report. There is a process on how that needs to be done. Inclusivity in governance. Doesn't the Constitution suggest
in governance?
Yes, inclusivity.
In governance.
Yes. Doesn't
is that thing anyway? Continue reading. Continue reading.
Doesn't the Constitution itself call for the face of Kenya when you're doing appointments and whatnot? Strengthening devolution. Doesn't the Constitution address itself on matters to do with devolution? Talk about youth economic empowerment. What exactly do you mean by that? The country has put in place through the Constitution in terms of the youth and the people of Kenya and where they are. You're talking about national debt audit. Did the Auditor General the other week talk about the audit queries and what needs to be done? And what happened? The very same leaders trashed that document. Now we're talking about right to peaceful assembly. The Constitution addresses itself on that. You talk about sovereignty and the rule of law. Shouldn't everybody just respect the sovereignty and the rule of law? So why do we need two gentlemen to come shake hands for these things to be achieved? They know what they need to do. They just choose not to.
And that's where we are. And that's the position in which we find ourselves today. But I do think that there's something that you can do because we're still here. If we weren't, then they wouldn't be. That you're still here and they still have an opportunity to keep your government righteous. You still have an opportunity to keep your leaders accountable. And there's certain things that you can do. We were to have a conversation about, which way for the opposition in terms of what happens now that there is this new pact. MOU, call it whatever you want to call it. We were supposed to have a conversation around that, but unfortunately, Jeremiah Kioni, the Secretary General of the Jubilee Party, was late today, so we couldn't accommodate that conversation. But it is an important one for us to have, because if one position was to then keep government accountable, in this case, it would be the opposition. And then that raises the question that so are the people for whom you're supposed to provide services, for whom you're supposed to provide conducive environments, would the people end up being a government's opposition?
I look at it from the aspect that the Constitution does not have the opposition. It has the National Assembly who are supposed to check the government. But as we speak right now, the National Assembly cannot do that work, which then goes back to mean that the people have to take the responsibility of checking the excesses and being the official opposition. So yes.
We have a role?
We've always had a role. And we're beginning to realize it more and more. With every passing day, I read, I look, I see. People are realizing it and they're beginning to understand it more and more. It has taken a lot of pain for people to understand this, but they're understanding it. The means by which the understanding has arrived may be secondary to the discussion, but people understand. And the consequences of enabling and allowing corrupt practices to continue flourishing, it's also beginning to dawn on them that the very things they pursue and want for themselves, those are the very things they sacrifice at the altar of accepting this impunity.
Yes.
You accept it, take it that you have given license for flight for everything that may have been beneficial to you. Because it isn't the money that you hear being misplaced. Where do you think it comes from? You. The money that you hear someone has done, God knows what, where do you think it comes from? You. Yes. So if that money doesn't get to where it's supposed to be, where it's supposed to go to, your money has gone.
Yes.
And you sit and watch. Again, let me take you back to what I said earlier about taxpayer. So when someone comes to give you money, who do you think, whose money do you think they're giving you? It's your money. So when do you let that money do what it's supposed to do? Because if it does, all these things that you feel you lack will not have the power that they now have, because you'll likely find systems working. And when they work, your complaints will go down. If we can't take health for granted, if we can't take education for our children for granted, basic, then what on earth are all these other things for? Forget these high-flown ideas we keep talking about. Just that health, education. I can walk into a hospital and I will receive health care. My children can wake up and go to school. Basic.
And not just go to school and get quality
education. And the thing is, we make these requests, we make these demands as though they were, huge intergalactic demands, but really it isn't. That you can. We looked at the 140 million.
Let me repeat them again.
We look at the 140 million that was doled out, or that was pledged in the last 2 weeks, 14 days. Yeah. If you take that 140 million and the things that it's actually able to do today in Kenya, you will pay capitation for 6,296 students per year under the free day secondary education. And what this does is that it gives each student 22,244 shillings. This was a great job by the Standard, by the way. Build 7 kilometers of tarmac road at 20 million per kilometer. I'm telling you, the whole thing done. You would pay a year's salary for 194 nurses at 60,000 shillings per month. A year. You would pay a nurse for a year, and you would pay 194 of them.
As you speak, clinical officers
on strike because you've not been able to pay them.
Yes.
You would pay a year. You would build 40 classrooms where there are children across the nation. When you talk, it doesn't matter where you look. Nairobi, Kilifi, Thika, wherever. There are children outside, learning outside. I wonder what happens to them today when the heavens have opened. Yes. But you'd be able to build 40 classrooms at 3.5 million shillings
and that
each.
Would give them what? Quality
education. You would buy 50 dialysis machines. Go to your level 6 hospital in Nairobi today, and people who are waiting for dialysis have to queue. and you're left to the mercies of somebody who will be able to smile at you. You would buy them for between 1.2 and 3.3 million shillings each. You would fund 2,800 students with bursaries at 50,000 shillings per year. You would construct 100 low-cost housing units at 1.4 million each. You would buy over 20 police vehicles. You would provide water access to 40 million people.
Tunabebwa.
40 million people. That's what you would do. That's what it would look like. The demands you're making, my good people, are not high in the sky demands. They're basic things for which, according to this is little money, would be able to do in this country. And the question is for you today to realize how you're making your choices, for whom you're making your choices, when and why you're making your choices. They're important ones to make. You should lament, but then you should actually take the next action. And usually it's educating yourself and making the final decision at the ballots. Those are the conversations that we have on Kenya's Biggest Conversations, and we don't stop. Good morning. It's 9 a.m.